I've driven more miles than I care to count. I've seen things most people wouldn't believe, and done things that still haunt me to this day. But nothing compares to what happened one night on an empty stretch of I-40 in Arkansas. It was around 2:30 a.m., the kind of deep, lonely hour where the world feels like it's holding its breath. The truck's headlights cast long, eerie shadows on the cracked pavement, and the hum of the engine was the only sound. I was the only one on the road, or so I thought. You see, driving trucks across the country, you get used to the solitude. But every now and then, you feel something. A shift in the air. A shadow crossing the road too quickly, or the sound of a car coming up behind you, but there's nothing there. That night, it started with the strange flickering of my headlights. At first, I thought it was just a glitch. Could have been a wire loose, or the bulbs acting up. But then it happened again. And again. Each flicker was followed by a sudden, heavy feeling in my chest, like someone, or something, was watching me. I checked my mirrors, nothing but the empty highway and the occasional roadside sign blurred by the speed. Then, I saw it. In the distance, way off to the side of the road, a figure. Just standing there, motionless, in the dark. It looked like a man, but something about the way he stood, it didn't feel right. His posture was off, too stiff, almost like he was posing, waiting for something. Maybe for me. I slowed the truck, trying to focus. I kept thinking, maybe it's just a hitchhiker. But deep down, I knew better. This wasn't the kind of place where you'd find people at this hour. No towns for miles. As I passed, I couldn't help but glance over. I'll never forget that moment. His face. His eyes. Empty. Hollow. Like someone had peeled back his skin and left nothing but darkness behind. My foot slammed on the gas. The truck roared to life, surging forward like a creature desperate to escape the cold grip of the night. But the feeling in my chest stayed. Something was wrong, and I couldn't shake it. I didn't know who that man was, or why he was out there in the middle of nowhere, but I knew one thing, I wasn't alone. The seconds felt like hours as I pushed the pedal to the floor, the engine roaring louder than ever. My hands gripped the wheel so tight my knuckles ached, but no matter how fast I drove, I couldn't outrun the feeling that something was closing in. I glanced at the rearview mirror, expecting to see nothing but the empty road. But there was a shadow. A moving shadow. At first, I thought it was just the reflection of the headlights, but when I looked closer, my stomach dropped. It was following me. A car. I hadn't seen it pull onto the road, but there it was, tailing me at a steady pace. The headlights were too dim to make out anything more, but I could feel the weight of it, like the driver was waiting for something. Waiting for me to make a mistake. I tried to stay calm. I was used to driving at night, to the occasional trucker who'd get a little too close, but this wasn't like the others. The car never passed me. It stayed behind, always a few yards back, like it was pacing me. Every now and then, I'd flick my turn signal on, signaling a lane change. But the car never moved to pass. It just kept its distance, right there, in the mirror. I'd speed up, and it would speed up. I'd slow down, and it would slow down. It was like we were locked in a dance, a silent chase through the dark. I don't know how long it lasted, 15 minutes. An hour? Time felt meaningless as my nerves started to unravel. The road ahead was still empty. Just miles and miles of darkness, but I couldn't escape that feeling. That car was still there, and I could feel eyes on me, piercing through the rearview mirror. Then, without warning, the lights of the car flickered. Once. Twice. And then, for a split second, they went out completely. The road ahead went pitch black. My heart skipped a beat. I slammed on the brakes, screeching across the asphalt. The truck's tires screamed in protest as I tried to regain control. For a brief moment, I thought I was going to roll the rig. But somehow, I managed to steady it. I quickly glanced over my shoulder, and the car was gone. Vanished. Like it had never been there at all. I sat there for a moment, trying to collect myself, my hands trembling on the wheel. I kept staring at the empty road, trying to make sense of it. My mind was spinning, trying to rationalize what had just happened. Was I seeing things? Was I just too tired? But deep down, I knew that wasn't the case. There was something wrong. Something off. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still being watched. I started driving again, this time slower. More cautious. But I couldn't escape the nagging sensation that there was something else out there on that road with me. Something I wasn't supposed to see. And the worst part? I wasn't sure if I'd ever make it to my destination. The road stretched endlessly in front of me, a dark ribbon of asphalt cutting through the heart of nowhere. I kept glancing at the rearview mirror, half expecting to see that car again, but there was nothing. Just the distant glow of the truck's taillights, flickering in the blackness. The air felt thick, oppressive, like something was holding its breath, waiting for the moment I let my guard down. But it was quiet. Too quiet. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was just fatigue messing with my head. I'd been driving for hours, after all. The monotony of the open road can play tricks on you, make you see things that aren't there. So, I focused on the road, my hands gripping the wheel, the hum of the tires on the pavement becoming a constant companion. And then I heard it. A tapping. Soft at first. A rhythmic tap-tap-tap against the window, just loud enough to be heard over the engine. My heart stopped. I turned to the passenger side, but there was nothing there. Just the empty seat. I looked back at the road, trying to stay calm, but the tapping continued. Faster now. Tap 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 tap. I glanced over again. Still nothing. No sign of anything out of the ordinary. I was alone. Right? I rubbed my eyes, trying to focus, but the tapping kept coming, as if it was right next to me. I couldn't ignore it any longer. I reached out to roll down the window, my fingers trembling as I turned the knob. The moment the glass lowered, the tapping stopped. The silence was deafening. I leaned out, hoping to catch a glimpse of something, anything that might explain it. That's when I saw it. On the road ahead, far off in the distance, was something that made my blood run cold. A figure. It wasn't a man this time. It was something else, too tall, too thin, with limbs that seemed to stretch unnaturally in the moonlight. The shape didn't move, it just stood there, its outline barely visible in the darkness, as though it was waiting for me to pass. My heart was pounding in my chest now. I slammed the window shut, my breath coming in shallow gasps. I couldn't take my eyes off it. The figure seemed to sway, like it was alive, but not quite. It didn't blink, didn't move. It just stood there, watching me. I thought about stopping. About getting out of the truck and checking it out. But something inside me screamed not to. Every instinct told me to keep moving. To get out of there as fast as I could. I slammed my foot down on the accelerator. The truck lurched forward, the headlights casting long shadows ahead. But the figure didn't disappear. It stayed there, always just out of reach, its presence suffocating. And that's when it hit me, this wasn't a coincidence. That car, the flickering lights, the tapping on the window, all of it, it was all part of something much bigger. Something I couldn't see yet, but could feel closing in on me. The figure was still in my mind, its image burned into my memory. And that's when I realized, this road wasn't just a highway. It was a trap. I drove faster than I ever had in my life, my foot so heavy on the gas pedal it felt like the truck might explode. The engine roared, and the world outside blurred into streaks of black and gray. I couldn't focus on anything except that figure, still lodged in my mind, that haunting silhouette standing motionless on the road. I tried to look ahead, to forget about it, but the air was suffocating. Every nerve in my body screamed that something was wrong, but I didn't know what it was. Was it just exhaustion? Some twisted play of shadows in the night? Or was something following me? The road stretched ahead, straight and endless, and yet I had this growing feeling that I wasn't making any progress. It felt like I was trapped in a loop. No matter how fast I drove, I couldn't escape that creeping dread. That thing was still out there, somewhere, and I could feel it, like an invisible weight on my chest, pressing harder with every mile. That's when I saw it again. The car. This time, it wasn't behind me. It was beside me. I didn't know how it had gotten there, but when I turned my head, it was riding parallel to me, just in the shadows of the truck's side mirror. The dim, flickering headlights barely illuminated its dark frame, but I could see enough to know that there was no driver inside. No one was behind the wheel. The car was just there, gliding silently alongside me, its presence utterly unnatural. I should have been terrified. I should have slammed the brakes, pulled off to the side, or anything to escape, but my body was frozen, like I couldn't move, couldn't think. All I could do was watch it. Then, just as quickly as it had appeared, it was gone, vanished, like smoke in the night. I forced myself to look ahead again, my hands shaking so badly I almost lost control of the wheel. My breath was coming in ragged gasps, my chest tight, heart pounding. I couldn't trust what I was seeing anymore. I was on the edge of losing my mind. But then, the radio flickered to life. It had been silent the entire time, but suddenly, the static gave way to a voice. A woman's voice. Soft. Cold. Don't stop. I jerked back, my head snapping to the radio. The voice was calm, almost hypnotic, like she wasn't speaking directly to me but to something else. But the words hit me like a punch to the gut. Don't stop. I grabbed the dial, desperate to turn it off, but the volume wouldn't budge. The voice continued, clearer now. You're already too far gone. I felt the temperature in the cab drop. A chill settled over me, colder than any night I'd ever experienced on the road. I could see my breath misting in front of me. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up as the voice continued, now more urgent. Keep driving, or it will find you. I slammed my hand on the radio, finally cutting the sound. The truck was silent again, but I couldn't shake the feeling. The voice had warned me, and the terror that gripped my chest was unlike anything I'd ever felt before. The road ahead began to shift, the pavement warping and curling like a serpent. I tried to focus, to stay on course, but the world around me was twisting, warping, becoming something alien. I could still hear that voice in the back of my mind, echoing the warning, keep driving. But where was I going? What was following me? And why did it feel like I was already trapped in its grasp? I didn't know the answer, but I knew one thing for sure, I couldn't stop. Not now. Not ever. I don't know how much time passed after the voice faded from the radio. The seconds felt like hours. The road around me, which once seemed endless, now felt like it was closing in. I glanced at my dashboard, my speed was climbing, the miles ticking by faster than they should have been. But something wasn't right. The truck felt off. It was like I was still moving, but I wasn't really going anywhere. The world outside the window was distorting, like a bad signal on an old TV. I tried to shake it off. I reached for the steering wheel tighter, forcing myself to focus. But the weight on my chest was unbearable. I could feel something behind me, something big, lurking just out of view. Like a predator waiting for the right moment to strike. And I was its prey. I glanced back at the rearview mirror. Nothing. Just darkness. But I knew it was there. I checked the side mirrors. Still nothing. The truck rumbled on, tires screeching as if they were being dragged through thick mud. But I wasn't driving on dirt. This was the highway, the same stretch of road I had been traveling for hours. My eyes darted to the dash again, my pulse quickening. The lights on the instrument panel were flickering in and out. The truck wasn't just malfunctioning, it was alive, moving of its own accord, as if it was being controlled by something outside of me. I looked out the side window. There, just past the darkness, I saw something in the distance, a shadowy figure. Just standing there, in the middle of the road. I slammed my foot on the brake, the tires screeching against the road. But it wasn't enough. The truck didn't slow down. It kept accelerating, as if it was determined to reach that figure. It was only when I realized that I couldn't stop the truck, couldn't control it, that the true terror hit me. It was the fear of not knowing, of being trapped, of being forced to drive straight into something that was waiting for me, something that had been following me for miles. The figure was getting closer. It was tall, thin, with long arms that hung unnaturally low. Its head was tilted, just like the man I had seen earlier, back on the side of the road. But this time, it wasn't standing still. It was moving. It wasn't walking, it was gliding. Floating. As if the air itself couldn't touch it. I screamed, slamming my hands against the wheel, trying to stop the truck. I tried shifting gears, but nothing responded. The steering was locked in place. The figure moved faster, gaining on me. Its hollow, black eyes locked onto mine through the side window. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I could only stare at it, paralyzed by the terror that washed over me. It was here. Suddenly, the truck lurched violently, as if something had grabbed hold of it. The world around me warped again, the pavement beneath me shifting, turning into something more organic, like the skin of some monstrous creature. I felt the truck fall, like it was being swallowed whole by the road. I could hear the creaking of metal, the whine of the engine as if it were in pain. And in that moment, I realized, the road wasn't just a road anymore. It had become something else, something alive, something that had been waiting for me to drive straight into it. I slammed my foot on the brake again, but the truck didn't respond. I screamed at the top of my lungs, but my voice was drowned out by the sound of the engine screeching and the earth groaning beneath me. And then, just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, I saw it. The figure. Standing in front of me, blocking the road. Its face was a void. Nothing but darkness, a pit that seemed to reach into the very core of the universe. And in that void, I saw eyes. The truck was still moving, but now it was no longer just a machine. It had become something worse. It was part of the thing in front of me, part of whatever nightmare this was. It was dragging me into its depths, and there was no escape. I tried to look away, to turn my head, but I couldn't. The figure's presence was consuming everything. It was pulling me in. And then, it spoke. "Don't stop now." The voice was the same as before, but it was more than just words. It was a command. A final, terrifying warning. And then, everything went black. I don't know how long I was out. Minutes? Hours? It felt like I had slipped into a void, lost between the world I knew and something worse. When I finally opened my eyes, I wasn't in the truck anymore. I was standing on the side of the road. I looked around, disoriented. The sky above was the kind of black you only see in nightmares, a thick, oppressive darkness that swallowed everything. There was no moon, no stars, just the deep, suffocating blackness. The road stretched out before me, but it was no longer the highway I knew. It was twisted. Twisting. The pavement was cracked, crumbling away, as if the very earth itself was decaying beneath me. And the air, it was thick with something foul, something wrong, like the smell of burnt rubber and rotting metal. I turned around, and the truck was gone. The empty stretch of highway behind me was just empty. No truck, no headlights, no sounds. Only that oppressive silence, the kind of silence that presses on your chest and fills your ears with the ringing of your own pulse. And then I heard it. A whisper. It wasn't the same voice as before. This one was softer. More intimate. Come closer. I froze. The voice came from behind me, from the depths of the darkness where I couldn't see. My heart raced, and every instinct screamed at me to run, to get away, but my body didn't move. I felt paralyzed. Then, through the blackness, a shape emerged. A figure. It was walking toward me, moving unnaturally, like it wasn't quite touching the ground. It was tall, impossibly tall. The same long, thin limbs I had seen before. The same hollow, empty eyes that seemed to devour the very light around them. I took a step back, but my feet wouldn't move. My body was frozen in place, like I was stuck in a nightmare where I couldn't wake up. Why didn't you stop? The figure's voice was deep now, distorted, like the sound of 1,000 whispers all layered on top of each other. It was a question, but it didn't sound like one. It felt like an accusation. I wanted to answer, to beg for mercy, but my throat was dry, and no words came out. The figure came closer. Its eyes, those empty, soulless eyes, locked onto mine. I could feel them digging into me, pulling me apart from the inside. Every inch of my body screamed to escape, but there was nowhere to run. The world around me was closing in. You've been driving for so long, the figure continued. For so long that you didn't even realize. You've already arrived. I didn't understand. I was so close to breaking, my mind unraveling as I tried to process what it meant. But the figure kept moving toward me, slowly, deliberately. And then, everything clicked. I wasn't on the road anymore. The truck wasn't just a machine. This place. This thing, the road, the truck, the figures, it was all part of something bigger. Something that had been feeding on me, on every mile I had driven. I hadn't been on a journey. I had been trapped. I had always been trapped. The figure was standing in front of me now. I could feel its cold, empty presence pressing against me. And then it whispered, one last time, you will never leave. The darkness closed in, swallowing everything. My body, my mind, my soul, everything was consumed. And then, there was nothing. When they found the truck the next morning, it was abandoned. No signs of a struggle, no trace of the driver. Just the truck, idling on the side of the road with the headlights flickering out. But if you look closely at the mirrors, if you look hard enough, you might just catch a glimpse of something following. Something that has been waiting. Watching. Waiting for its next driver. And for those who've seen the figure on the road, they never make it back. The road calls to them. And the road never lets go.